Tim, guitar player, teacher. In this video, we'll be looking at an introduction to reading music, but before we start, I wanted to go over a few things. First, there are many different systems of writing and understanding music that have been developed in different cultures around the world. I will only be discussing the Western system during the Common Practice period and the modern era up to the present. Second, I will not be applying these lessons to any specific instrument, only the writing method itself. To learn to play anything written in music notation properly, many hours must be spent learning the note positions and practicing the techniques needed for that particular instrument. It is indeed a long process, but very well worth it. Finally, for some instruments, alternative notations have been used throughout the years to write music for that individual instrument. And while they can be helpful, almost none of them are as complete in the information they provide, and none of them are universal, so they can only be read on the particular instrument they were written for. I will not be covering any of those in this video either. I will only be focusing on the standard system of music notation. Music is written on a series of lines and spaces called the staff. There are 5 lines numbered from the bottom up. We will also be using the spaces in between those lines. So altogether we have 5 lines and 4 spaces. Each line or space is a different natural note. As we go up the staff, we're going up in pitch and the notes follow the alphabet forward. As we go down the staff, the notes get lower in pitch and the alphabet goes backwards. Next we'll look at how the notes themselves are written. There are 4 main parts to a note: the note head, the stem, flags, and beams. We're not going to use every part for every note, but the part they all must have is the head. The head will be placed on either a line, so the line goes right through the middle of it, or a space, so the head does not cross either surrounding line. Which line or space the note head is written on tells us which note to play. If the note requires an accidental, it is written before the note head and must be in the same position as the note. The other 3 parts of the note tell us about the rhythm or the timing of the note. We'll talk about that a little more in the next video. So altogether we have a total of 9 natural notes that can be written on any staff. However, if we look at a piano, for example, there are a lot more notes than that. In fact, there are 88. So we need to narrow down which notes we're going to be reading. That is done with a symbol called a clef. At the very beginning of any musical staff, there is always a clef. The clef basically tells us which range of notes are going to be used on that staff. There are several different clefs, but the 2 most common ones are called the treble clef and the bass clef. The treble clef is for higher pitched notes, while the bass clef is for lower pitched notes. First, let's look at the notes on the treble clef. An easy way to memorize them is to separate the lines from the spaces. The lines are E, G, B, D, and F. A common saying used to help remember this is, "Every good boy does fine." The spaces are F, A, C, and E, spelling out the word face. So this gives us a quick and easy way to identify any note we see written on the treble clef. The bass clef uses these notes. And again, if we separate the lines from the spaces, we can create sayings to help us memorize them quickly. For the lines, G, B, D, F, and A, we might say, "Good boys do fine always." For the spaces, A, C, E, and G, we might say, "All cows eat grass." These are the most common sayings that are generally taught for this, but honestly, it doesn't matter how we memorize them, we just need to memorize them. Some frequently asked questions at this point are, why aren't the notes the same? Why doesn't it start at A? Basically, why are the notes what they are? And these questions can be answered by looking at what is called the movable C clef. For reasons that will be discussed later, C is a very common starting point in music. This clef is designed to show us where C is located, and the rest of the notes are adjusted accordingly. Whichever line the point of this clef is on, that line becomes C. If I put this C note at the top, then all of the lines on the staff would be lower than that, so it would be most appropriate for a bass instrument or singer to perform those notes. As I move the clef down the staff, the notes found within the staff get slightly higher. Since there are 5 lines to which this clef could be attached, there are 5 movable C clefs: the soprano clef, the mezzo-soprano clef, the alto clef, the tenor clef, and the baritone clef. At some point, however, a universal system becomes much more useful. Instead of moving C around to create a completely different set of notes, C is placed permanently on a new line in between 2 staves, and the notes for each staff are adjusted accordingly. Now, as you'll learn, the interval of a fifth, going from any note to the 5th one away, is very important in music. If we start at our C note and go up to the 5th note, we land on the 2nd line of the upper or treble clef. This note is G. Notice the circle shape found in the treble clef is circling that same G note. For this reason, the treble clef is sometimes called the G clef. This is also why the treble clef kind of looks like a capital G. Now, if we start back at our C note and go down to the 5th note, we land on the 4th line of the lower or bass clef. This note is F. Notice the 2 parts of the bass clef that highlight this note: the single dot on the left and the 2 dots surrounding it. This clef is sometimes called the F clef, and while it may not look like a modern F, it does actually resemble the way that the letter F used to be written. Together, these 2 clefs, along with the C note found in between them, called middle C, make what is called the grand staff. While most instruments use one clef or another, instruments that have a very wide range of notes, like a piano, use the grand staff. There is also a clef for instruments that don't actually play accurate pitches, like most drums and percussion instruments, for example. This is called the neutral clef. Because it is used by drummers and percussionists, it is sometimes called the drum or percussion clef. The lines and spaces on this clef can represent anything and depend on the instrument that is reading it. Modern drum music is a good example of this. The notes all represent one of the drums, while the X's each represent different symbols. And we can also extend the range of any staff by adding what are called ledger lines. These are simply extensions of the staff and can be added either above or below. Almost all instruments have ranges greater than a single staff, so ledger lines are very common. So those are the basics of reading music. Well, identifying pitch at least. As I said earlier, this is simply about the system that is used to read and write the music, not how to play it on any specific instrument. For that, I would suggest finding a good teacher to help, or if you can't do that, at least a book that focuses on reading for your particular instrument. At any rate, as we go through the rest of this series, the examples I give will be using this notation, so it's very important to know. Our next video will discuss how to read rhythm and keep up with the timing of music. Until then, thanks for taking the time to watch. Take care.